If you actually go for a walk with a cassette player, rather than just testing it at home, there is one little thing you'll notice pretty quickly: the rolling effect. The sound wobbles only when I walk. If I stay still, it plays normally. And this is just one of many things nostalgia made us forget. Hi, my name is Vladimir, and for the past month, I've been only listening to music using this late 80s portable cassette player. And it's been a really great experience. I truly rediscovered a lot of music, but there are just so many things that can go wrong with cassettes, especially when you take them out from the comfort of your home hi-fi system into the dirt and dust and chaos of the outside world. The rolling effect is just the tip of the iceberg.
The rolling effect is caused by the cassette player's flywheel, which is a relatively large and heavy wheel responsible for moving the tape at a constant speed. Its inertia makes it resist sudden changes in rotation, which works great for a stationary tape deck. But what happens when the player itself is moving? If we suddenly rotate the tape playback mechanism along the flywheel's axis, the flywheel's inertia pushes back against the rotation, making it slow down or speed up relative to the rest of the mechanism. That causes a momentary change in playback speed, which you perceive as musical instruments briefly sounding out of tune.
I'm not the only one who's hearing this, right?
With subtle things like this, you always want to make sure you're not just going crazy and hearing things that aren't there. Here is this player playing a special calibration cassette with a 3 kHz tone, connected to a computer that's measuring variation in playback speed. I'm holding the player steady, and it shows 0.2%, which is a pretty decent result for a portable cassette player. Now watch what happens when I start shaking the player, imitating, for example, running with it in my pocket. The speed variation rises so high that the meter needle gets pegged. You can also hear the variation. On simple single-instrument recordings, it's much more noticeable. The solution to the rolling effect is dead simple. Just install a second flywheel that spins in the opposite direction. When you rotate the player, one flywheel will try to speed up, while the other one will try to slow down. And since they are connected by a belt, their efforts will cancel each other out. More advanced cassette players with auto-reverse mechanisms, which can play the tape in both directions, get this feature for free, since they already have a second flywheel that's used to pull the tape in the opposite direction.
The player that I have here is actually pretty rare. It was made in the Soviet Union, right behind the Iron Curtain. But believe me or not, it uses the very same Japanese Tanashin mechanism as virtually any newly produced cassette player, so it suffers from all the same issues. Well, suffers. The cassette player sound is actually really cool, especially if you have a good pair of headphones. Yes, the highest frequency range is capped at 10 kHz, and the dynamic range is only 45 decibels, but none of this really matters these days. This competition has been long over. I'm currently listening to Oasis' What's a Story Morning Glory, and it sounds exactly what it should sound like. Loud, noisy, and dirty. Brick-walled, as audio engineers say. It's a shame that we all have these high-fidelity digital players in our pockets right now. But then they removed the headphone jacks and made us buy those expensive and really mediocre quality wireless earbuds with their dull, lifeless sound. It's really much better the other way around. Maybe not the cleanest signal source, but a really good pair of headphones that will serve you for decades. What does bother me about this player's specs is the promised battery life, only 4.5 hours. It's just ridiculous. I hope there is some kind of mistake and the batteries will last much longer. We'll see. for now, let's just enjoy the walk, accompanied by great music, nicely played through this 36 years old Soviet portable cassette player.
The tape playback is over, it should have popped the play button up and stopped. Instead, it tries to keep pulling the tape. As innocent as it seems, this can have some pretty bad consequences. For now, I'll just stop manually, flip the cassette, and continue walking.
The rolling effect became just unbearable when I was climbing these stairs. The 70s electronic music is composed using very simple, very pure synthetic tones, and so it suffers the most. It's sort of a curse to know how this thing works. You develop a sort of technical anxiety. You know what can go wrong, and so instead of just relaxing and listening to music, you become hyper-aware of every little flaw. It's extremely distracting. I eventually decided to carry the player like this, so it doesn't shake with my body and doesn't produce this pretty unpleasant effect that is now really evident.
If this player had been made by Apple, they probably would have said that I'm just carrying it wrong. And indeed, people in the 80s were supposed to carry it around their neck on a strap. The manual says this player originally came with one, but unfortunately I don't have it. I tried using a strap from an old Canon camera, but it was just a little bit too wide. Maybe that's for the best though, because I can't say I love the idea of something this big hanging from my neck. Doesn't seem to make it much more stable either. Maybe a fanny pack would work better for preventing the rolling effect. And how did you carry your player back in the day? Shoot me a comment, it would really be an interesting topic to discuss.
There is some sort of dark energy here behind that vent, because listen to what happens. Interference. And when I turn, it disappears. And interference again. It looks like this player has got itself some Wi-Fi support.
The magnetic head that reads the tape produces a very small signal, typically around 2 millivolts. This signal is then sent to an amplifier, which boosts it to a level that can be heard through headphones. However, before reaching the amplifier, the signal must travel through a cable that connects the playback head to the rest of the circuit. That cable can act as an antenna. The electric field from a nearby Wi-Fi router a few meters away is approximately 0.7 volts per meter. Even if the cable connected to the magnetic head is only 5 centimeters long, up to 35 millivolts of interference could be induced across it. Nonsense! 35 millivolts! That's like 20 times the actual signal. This just can't be right. And Wi-Fi operates at 5 GHz. We shouldn't be able to hear it. What we are hearing is not the Wi-Fi signal itself, but a phenomenon known as parasitic demodulation. Wi-Fi doesn't transmit continuously. Instead, it sends data in short bursts, yielding the airwaves to other transmitters periodically. The amplifier's input transistor acts as an unintended radio detector, stripping away the gigahertz carrier and leaving only the pattern of those bursts, albeit at a much lower amplitude. If the bursts repeat hundreds or thousands of times per second, that pattern falls within the audio range and becomes audible.
Some might say, see, what a horrible world we're living in, full of interference that's quietly frying our brain. 30 years ago, in the world when this player was created, there was no such interference. That's why it's not protected from it. And I'll respond. You just didn't yet hear the interference that was all over the place in the 90s and early 2000s when these players were still a thing.
In 2G networks, each phone was allowed to transmit a data burst every 0.004615 seconds. That's approximately 217 times per second, resulting in a 217 Hz tone that could be heard through improperly shielded loudspeakers. 2G networks were shut down a few years ago, or so they say. In reality, they've only been closed off to us, regular mobile phone users. Many security alarms, utility meters, automatic garage doors, and other devices are still operating over functioning 2G networks. That's why, when walking with this cassette player through rich people's neighborhoods, you can still occasionally hear that characteristic old mobile phone sound that, theoretically, you shouldn't hear anymore.
And even in the good old USSR of the 1989, where there was certainly no cell phones, this player was still prone to interference. But it was a good thing, because it actually allowed you to turn this portable cassette player into a portable AM radio receiver. And this time, auto-stop worked. It's a mystery how it works. Now let's put it back to the bag and listen to this Soviet music. This type of music, the rock music, the music from that time, it sounds just perfect. This is a perfect device for listening to such kind of music. The sound is juicy, the sound is warm, everything matches, it's perfect. No high bitrate digital media file will sound as good as this cheap plastic player and God knows what quality Soviet tape. I'm talking like an audiophile, except that this player is nowhere near a high-end equipment. It is not a hi-fi equipment. It is, well, deliberately lo-fi equipment.
The tape is over, but the auto-stop doesn't work again. The auto-stop feature in a cassette player mechanism is not just a convenient feature, it's a safety feature. You see, the tape is not pulled by this rotating reel. It's pulled by this pinch roller, which presses the tape against this shaft. This makes it much easier to achieve a steady playback speed. That means, if the take-up reel stops, the pinch roller will keep pulling the tape. With nowhere to go, the tape will tangle up. A good auto-stop mechanism stops playback when the take-up reel stops, preventing a disaster. However, that requires a complex mechanism, so cheaper players like this one use a different approach. They press against the moving tape with this plastic sensing lever. When the tape is running, it has a little bit of a slack, so the lever can move all the way down. But when the tape reaches the end, the pinch roller keeps pulling it, creating tension. The taut tape then pushes the lever up, engaging the stop mechanism. As we saw, this only works some of the time. Sometimes the pinch roller can create enough tape tension to engage the auto-stop mechanism. What's worse, this lever is isolated from the take-up rail by the pinch roller and capstan, so it won't detect a stop take-up rail, for example when a belt breaks. This has never actually happened to me personally, but a lot of people have had their favorite tapes chewed up this way. To film the video demonstration of the problem, I had to pull some tape out of a cassette I don't use and glue it to the cassette case to simulate a failed take-up reel. The tape ended up getting severely damaged. I explain more of the little tricks I use to film my videos on my Patreon. Subscribe if you want to see more. The link is in the pinned comment. And sorry to all the fans of Ladysmith Black Mambazo. I know you've been searching for this rare compilation with a typo error on the cover for decades, and I just destroyed it for the content.
I guess the main conclusion of the day is that not every type of music is good for listening on devices like this. Some is good and you'll be enjoying the music, some is not, and you'll be listening for technical defects. And how to understand what's good and what's not? Well, try and error.
The next day, I headed to the metro to see if all the electricity down there caused any interference with the player. I shoved it everywhere, tried different types of trains, even the tram, nothing.
And on the other hand, there is a pretty noticeable interference from this burger shop neon sign. I mean, I'm afraid to bring it even closer because this interference might fry this brittle old Soviet player schematics. This is pretty scary. Those of you who have been paying attention probably noticed this weird thing on my headphones. So, what is this? And this is actually one of the now completely forgotten reasons of why the general public ditched their wired headphones so easily.
Wired headphones had, well, a wire, which, besides constantly getting tangled, had another weak point. The joint between the flexible cable and the rigid plug was fragile. Since your music player spent most of its life bouncing around in your pocket, the cable would eventually break right at that spot. One earbud would stop working, usually intermittently, which was incredibly annoying. If you had a $20 pair of headphones, you'd just throw them away and would buy another pair. Now, if you'd paid $100 for your headphones, well, you would try to replace the connector instead. Replacing the connector wasn't exactly fun. The wires were incredibly thin, difficult to solder, and the repair rarely lasted long. 6 months later, you'd often find yourself doing it all over again. Each repair also makes the cable a little shorter, because you have to cut a couple centimeters off every time. Eventually, I got tired of this and came up with my own solution. I cut off the original cable, soldered a headphone jack socket directly onto the headphones, and connected them to the player with a detachable male-to-male cable. Whenever the cable failed at this joint, I simply threw it away and plugged in a new one. Since this connection was under much less stress, it lasted for years. Eventually, though, this one failed too. At that moment, I didn't have a spare cable-mounted jack socket and I needed to leave in a hurry, so I quickly soldered on a PCB-mounted jack, covered it with hot glue, and headed out. That was in 2019, and it just never broke since then. Once again, a temporary solution became permanent.
One of the disadvantages of listening to honestly bought, properly licensed, pre-recorded cassette tapes versus listening to home-recorded C90 cassettes with material of dubious legality is that home-recorded C90 cassettes contain, well, an hour and a half of music, while pre-recorded cassettes usually contain only one album. Just look at how few tape this cassette actually has. It's almost half empty. But despite being half empty, it still occupies the space in my bag, so I'm essentially wasting space in my bag. And now this cassette is over, and I'm still pretty far away from home, and I have no music to listen to on my way. But on the bright side, by now I listened to just over 4.5 hours of music, which is expected battery lifetime in this player according to the official user's manual. and this player still worked perfectly. I don't know whether it's because the official user's manual is quite conservative in its battery lifetime estimations, or maybe it's because modern batteries from Amazon have higher capacity than those old Soviet batteries. We'll see, we'll see. Another important source of electromagnetic interference is the internal combustion engine. Last time I tried driving with a Soviet radio cassette made by the same factory, I've heard a lot of weird noises when the engine was running. So, is it possible to comfortably listen to music on this player while driving? The player can be connected to the car pretty easily. Sounds good, no interference. Let's start the engine.
This is the voice of Enigma.
Sounds good, no interference from the engine. Let's go.
We will take you with us.
Listening to music from a cassette can transform absolutely any mundane experience. This player just took me back to the prosperous, sunny European 90s I could only see on TV. But it is really 1990-something here. Look at all these vehicles that are parked here. Look at this one. Ooh. And this, what it is, 1998. Wow. It's my lucky day. And if I want to see the playlist while I'm walking, I can just reach for my pocket and take it and open it. And that's it. No lag animations, no distracting notifications, just the information that you really need. And that seems to be it. The batteries have discharged and the player is now playing too slowly. Listen to this. This is definitely too slow. You know, sometimes when you're tired or something, the music starts sounding too fast or too slow than usual. It's a pretty common psychological effect, I guess. So I double-checked by playing this song on... So I double-checked by playing this song on Spotify, and yes, on Spotify it plays faster than this. So it's time to return to my home lab and make some measurements.
This is a calibration tape. It contains a steady 3000 Hz test tone. By measuring the playback frequency, we can calculate exactly how fast or slow the player is running. The cassette player is actually still running at the correct speed. The player isn't the problem here. I found this tape in a box of used cassettes that I bought on eBay for recording. It already contained a homemade recording, and it sounded fine at first, so I kept it. But it turns out the recorder that made the original recording was running too fast. As a result, even on a properly calibrated cassette deck, the tape now plays back too slowly. Here is the same excerpt from the cassette, and from the original CD. The original recording is 13.5 seconds long. The cassette version takes 13.75 seconds. That means the cassette is playing back about 1.8% slower than it should. And as we've just proved, that's more than enough to be heard.
And that means I can continue my walks with the player. Here is all the music I've listened to in the past month.
It's approximately 20 hours of music. I listened to Genesis twice. It's a great album. And the player is still running fine on the very same set of batteries. We certainly didn't have such a high capacity batteries in the 80s and 90s. So, what was the point of all this? Every time I think about it, I come up with a different answer.
You go down the street, you listen to music, you hear the signal drops, the wow and flutter. You feel that this little player is actually making an effort in order to play your music for you. You know that there is some real struggle going on down there. You know that there is some real physical work being done for you right now. And it's just incredible. It's much more rewarding than streaming some encrypted media files from some over-engineered cloud server while simultaneously sending back megabytes of telemetry, God knows for what purpose. The marketers and the tech bros, they are capable of destroying everything they touch.